Good afternoon to all of you. Again, this is Kurt, and on behalf of our team, first off, I would like to wish everyone happy holy month of Ramadan. I would like to warmly welcome and thank each and everyone on this week's session of our webinar. For this week's webinar, we will be discussing the important concepts of anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, which are essential for maintaining a safe and secure compliance system. As you might be aware already, the authority have started strict enforcement on this specific compliance. Hence, we aim to provide valuable insights and practical advice on how to implement effective AML CTF measures in your organization. Along with me is our team of experts as well, Mr. Mohammed Shark Nadim and Ms. Mariam. Again, the first half will be allotted for us to discuss the relevant topic for this week. Questions and clarifications are very much welcome. As usual, you may drop it on the message box below, and we'll have it addressed on the latter part of this session. So without any further ado, we will now proceed with the discussion of this webinar. Okay, to go through with today's webinar pointers, we'll be tackling about the general overview of AML CFT, regulated entities obligation, business risk assessment and management, enhanced due diligence, SARs and STRs, ongoing monitoring and record keeping, compliance officer importance and roles and responsibilities. So these are the specific topic that we're going to try to cover for today's webinar. Okay. So to give you an overview with regards to what exactly is AML and CFT, in 2018, the UAE, with the extensive participation of all concerned authorities, conducted its first national risk assessment on money laundering and terrorist financing. So this specific assessment identified a number of areas in which the risk of money laundering terrorist financing are highest. So later on, we'll be identifying which are the regulated entities that were identified on this assessment. It was followed in 2018 by the FATF, or the Financial Action Task Force, where they have also evaluated the UAE in accordance with international requirements and found a number of areas that will benefit from a national framework for combating money laundering and terrorist financing in order to develop further. So the FATF is the Global Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Watchdog. So basically, they are the one who will promote global standards to mitigate the risk and assesses whether the countries are taking effective action on this one. So as a result of the above actions, I'm sorry, please let us know if the voice is audible. All right. So to continue with what we are discussing, as a result of the above action, the UAE has adopted a mature and rigorous AML CFT legal frameworks under which the new AML law and its cabinet decision, as stated on the screen, which is the Federal Decree number 20 of 2018 on anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, and Cabinet Decision number 10 of 2019, as well as Cabinet Decision number 24 of 2022. So the UAE were able to streamline its AML CFT measures and applied a unified AML CFT legal framework across all Emirates, commercial free zones, and financial free zones in the UAE. So now we're going to move on with the framework for the AML. So the AML law, as it was established, requires the establishment of an independent financial intelligence unit within the Central Bank of UAE. So this FIU is basically the one who will exclusively receive the STRs that will be submitted and related information from all financial institutions and DNFBPs for consideration, analysis, and referral to the domestic competent authorities. So as shown on the screen as well, these are the governing bodies created to supervise and govern the reinforcement of the AML and CTF law. So the NAML-CFTC, or the National Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Financing of Terrorism and Illegal Organizations Committee, is the primary body for policy making and issuing regulations related to efforts to combat money laundering and terrorism financing in the UAE. So aside from that, there are subcommittees as shown on the presentation, which are the one who will handle the delegation of each specific area on this specific money laundering or combating financing terrorism thereof. So as I have mentioned a while back, these are the regulated entities that was specified on the assessment. So we have first the financial institutions. It was followed by the designated non-financial businesses and professionals, or the DNFBPs. So under these DNFBPs, we have five business entities that they have identified. We have the real estates, dealers of precious metals and stones, the company or corporate service providers, auditors and accountants, legal consultancy firm, except for lawyers and notary publics. So aside from these two main regulated entities, there's a recently added one, which is the virtual assets service provider. So this one refers to any natural or juridical persons who conduct any activity of commercial businesses, which conducts one or more of the activities of virtual assets for the benefits on or on behalf of another natural or legal person in exchange, transfer, or trading of the virtual assets. So basically, they are the one who will facilitate the trading, exchange, or transfer of any virtual assets. So now to give you an idea or to clear out the concept of the money laundering, money laundering is defined as any financial or banking transaction aimed at concealing or changing the source of illegally obtained funds. So this is by means of passing it through the financial and banking system in order to make it appear as originating from legitimate sources and then repumping and investing it legally. So as defined by the AML CFT law, money laundering as engaging in any of the following acts: willfully having knowledge that the funds or the proceeds of a felony or a misdemeanor, like facilitating the transfer of movement, concealing or disguising the true nature of the proceeds, or acquiring, possessing, or using proceeds upon receipt. So, as defined by law, these funds or proceed was defined in a very broad sense. So, it can be tangible, intangible, movable, or immovable, including national currency, foreign currencies, documents, or notes evidencing the ownership of those assets, or associated rights in any notes, forms including electronic or digital forms, or any interest, profits, or income originating or earned from these assets. So we have here three stages or three processes that we are considering when it comes to money laundering. We have first the placement, after that is the layering, then after that is the integration. So placement basically refers to the introducing of these criminal proceeds on the financial system that we have. So this can be by means of change of currency and denomination, transportation of cash, and cash deposits. So after that one, after the criminal proceed was introduced, they will be proceeding with the layering, which would refer to disguise the illicit nature of such funds. So this can be by means of wire transfer, deposit of cash into another bank accounts, or cash withdrawal as well. After the layering, they would then proceed with the integration, which would refer to creating an alleged legal origin of criminal proceeds. So this can be, they will identify it as coming from a fictitious loans, sales turnover, deeds, capital gains, or etc. So now moving on with what the DNBP is supposed to comply with, we have here stated 7 points. So the first is going to be registration on the Goaml Portal, followed by appointing a compliance officer, adopting an implementation of internal controls, policies, and procedures, undertake necessary due diligence measures, assessment of risks involved, necessary reporting like SAR, STR, REAR, or DPMS. So necessary reporting would typically be upon request of the authority or would also depend on the transaction that the business is going to have. After that, you are supposed to have the proper record keeping and monitoring. So this obligation we will be discussing it one by one further on this webinar. Okay. So the GoAML system. So as what I have specified first, DNFBPs are required to register on the GoAML portal or the GoAML system. So this system is developed by the UNODC or the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes. So this is an integrated digital platform through which financial institutions, designated non-financial businesses, occupation, and relevant authorities can send suspicious transaction reports or suspicious activities reports to the FIU. So this is being used by the FIU itself to receive, analyze, distribute suspicious transaction reports in a fast and efficient manner. So there are already a large number of FIUs worldwide who are currently using it. And the United Arab Emirates is the first Gulf country to apply this modern system. So as I have mentioned, all the NFBP were required to register on the GoAML system as this allowed the companies to help authority to identify criminal and suspicious activity. As such, there is no specific deadline stated by the authority by which the DNVP are subject to register on this system, but it is highly advisable to do the registration at the earliest upon starting your business itself. So for new businesses specifically, the registration on the GoAML system would be required for you to be able to open up a bank account. The next one is appointing a compliance officer or MLRO or money laundering reporting officer. So to make it short, the compliance officer must be independent and qualified. So the compliance officer with the appropriate competencies and experience to perform the statutory duties and responsibilities that we will be discussing later on. Also, the compliance officer performs these duties under his or her own responsibility, through which we are referring to the independent nature of the compliance officer itself. So we have here the compliance officer tasks, which can be grouped broadly into the following categories: the MLFT reporting, AML CFT program management, and AML CFT training and development. So to discuss the first bullet point, which is the MLFT reporting, the compliance officer is DNFBP's officer in charge of reviewing, scrutinizing, and reporting the suspicious transaction reports. So in this capacity alone, the compliance officer is ultimately responsible for the detection of transactions related to the crimes of money laundering. So they are the one who will be able to decide whether to report this suspicious transaction to the respective authority, which is the FIU itself. So the next one is the AML CFT program management, by which the compliance officer should ensure the quality, strength, and effectiveness of the DNFBP's AML CFT program that is being applied all throughout the organization. So the third point is the AML CFT training development, by which the compliance officer is responsible for helping to establish and maintain a strong and effective AML CFT compliance culture within the DNFBP. This is by having a coordination internally and externally by the stakeholder to ensure that DNFBP staff are well qualified, well trained, well equipped, and well aware of their responsibility to combat the threats posed by the ML or FT. So one of the obligation, as we have stated a while back, is the AML CFT policies and procedure. So we're gonna go through one by what exactly is the policies, what exactly is considered as the procedure, and what are the controls that you would have to apply on your organization. So the policies, these are basically a set of rules or parameters which mandates, specifies, or prohibits conduct in order to enhance the institution's mission, which ensures coordinated compliance with applicable laws and regulation and promotes operational efficiency and or reduce the risk that was involved thereof. Procedures, on the other hand, is like the step-by-step process on carrying out the policies as stated as well. So the DNFBP should ensure that the policies, controls, and procedures that they implement to manage and mitigate the risk are reasonable and proportionate to the risk involved. They must be approved by senior management and should be continuously updated and must be applied all throughout the DNFBP organization. So the controls are the internal technology or tools the DNFBP utilizes to ensure the AML CFT program is functioning as intended and within the predefined parameters. So in developing the internal AML CFT control system, the DNFBP should also take into account their IT infrastructure and management information systems capabilities. So just to make it shorter, this AML policies and procedure actually covers a broad aspect, a lot of aspect like the due diligence, risk assessment, and such. So this would serve as your company's manual or backbone on how you would be able to go through with each of the transactions that you're gonna have, how you will be able to assess the risk that will be involved on each transaction, as well as how you will be able to do a proper documentation for each transaction that you're gonna have. Or Okay, so to break it down one by one, what will be included on the policy and procedure? The first one is going to be the customer due diligence. So supervised entities are required to undertake CDD measures to ascertain the customer's identity. So under the due diligence alone, there's a lot of things that has to be involved or included in it. The first thing is going to be the KYCs or KYB. So basically, this would include like the profiling of your clients or the business that you are dealing with. So this would include verifying the identity of the customer, beneficial owners, beneficiaries, and controlling persons. So you're supposed to have like customer identification, the profiles, customer acceptance, risk ratings, monitoring, investigation, and documentation as well as. So this once you already have all the necessary information and relevant documents on that specific transactions or client that you are dealing with, you have to proceed with the proper screening. So on the screening itself, you are supposed to refer to specific lists. These are just few examples that we have right now. So we have the UAE terrorist list, UNSC, PEP or the politically exposed person, and the adverse media. So after that one is the risk assessment and management. So on this assessing the risk that is involved all throughout the organization, all throughout the transaction that you're dealing with, there are four kinds of risk that we have to consider. So the first one is going to be the customer risk. So customer risk factor relates to the types of categories of customers that you are dealing with. Like for example, you would have to consider the type of customers that you have, whether they have a high net worth, whether they have a low net worth, or whether they are a resident or a non-resident here as well. The customer risk also varies per the NFBPs depending on the customer base that they have and the maturity of relationships that they have with that specific client. So the next one is the service transaction risk. So a DNFBP should take stock of its line of businesses, products, and services that are more vulnerable to ML or FT abuse. So for this one, it can also refer to like typologies or the methods through which the transaction are being carried out, like the payment itself, whether it is through cash, through credit card, or check. The next one is going to be for geographical risk. So for this one, the organization should consider geographic risk factors both from domestically and cross-border sources. So where the DNFBP has offices, branches, and subsidiaries and location in which the customers reside or conduct their activities. So they have to consider as well the country's regulatory supervisory framework, the international sanction to which the country belongs to, and the reputation of the country itself. So this will be followed by the delivery channel risk. So delivery channel risk, basically when evaluating delivery channel related risk, the DNFBP should pay particular attention to those channels, whether related to customer acquisition or relationship management, or to how the product or service is being delivered to the client. These kind of channels which might have the potential to favor the anonymity of the direct client they are dealing with. So after doing this proper screening, the customer due diligence, as well as assessing the risk involved, it might be that they can proceed with the enhanced due diligence. So DNFBPs are obliged to enhance their CDD measures with regards to customers identified as high risk, as well as when there are red flag indicators of potentially unusual or suspicious transaction or activities. So generally speaking, EDD involves like a more rigorous or intensified CDD measures that they have. So this can be done specifically by obtaining further evidence and information on that specific transaction and the clients that you're dealing with. So you could obtain additional information and evidence like sources of funds, sources of wealth, occupation or types of business, and other supporting documents that you might think will seem fit to enhance whatever due diligence or background checking that you're going to do with that specific transaction. So in cases in which EDD is applied, you should ensure that you will have to take reasonable measures to obtain adequate, substantiated information about the customer, commensurate with the level of the risk identified or involved with that specific transaction alone. So, next one is the submission of SAR or STR. So the DNFBPs are obliged to promptly report to the FIU suspicious transaction and any additional information required in relation to them when there are suspicions or reasonable grounds to suspect. So suspicious transaction refers to any transaction, whether it is an attempted transaction or funds, which a DNFBP has a reasonable ground to suspect as constituting the proceeds of the crime. So it should be noted that the only requirement for a transaction to be considered as suspicious is for you to have at least a reasonable grounds in relation to the conditions that I have just mentioned a while back. So the suspicious nature of a transaction can be inferred from a certain information, including like certain indicators, behavioral patterns, or CDD information that was obtained while doing the screening and the due diligence measures. So these SAR and STR will specifically be submitted through the Goaml system or portal, and this will soon be received by the FIU and processed for any required further information or documents or for further action by law enforcement or supervisory authorities. So when an STR involves an anticipated pending, let's say an already in progress transaction, the organization should use their best effort to delay the execution or completion of the transaction in order to allow for a reasonable amount of time in which to receive feedback, instruction, or additional information requests from the FIU itself. The next obligation that the DNFBPs are complied to oblige with is the proper record keeping and the monitoring. So the DNFBPs are required to maintain the records in an organized fashion so as to permit data analysis and the tracking of financial transactions and to make the records available to the competent authorities immediately upon request. So basically, the organization are obliged to maintain like a detailed records, documents, data, and statistics for all the transactions that you're going to undertake. All records obtained through CDD measures, account files, and business correspondences as well, and results of any analysis undertaken, as well as a variety of record types and documents associated with the risk assessment and mitigation measures that was done. So the statutory retention period for all the records is supposed to be kept for at least 5 years. So we have specified here the required record types that you are supposed to be keeping. The first one is the transaction records. So transaction records refer to operational and statistical record documents, information concerning all the transaction executed or processed by the DNFBP, whether it is domestic or international in nature. The next one that you're supposed to keep are the CDD records, which is the records, documents, and information about the customer, the due diligence that you have undertook, and the investigation and analysis of their activities, and can be further divided into categories like the customer information, the company information, ongoing monitoring of business relationship, and the STR or SAR that was conducted there. So we have now discussed the obligations that you are supposed as a DNFBP to comply with. I would just like to take this moment as well to inform how AMCA will be able to assist you with all the requirements that I have discussed. So we have here the first services that we're offering is the Goaml assessment and registration, by which we're going to do an assessment first to check the applicability of this specific compliance on your organization, which will further be followed by the registration if we have found out that you are required to be registered on the GoAML system. So we also do the GoAML penalty appeal assistance if in any case, for example, you have received a penalty from the relevant authority. We have the GoAML deregistration, AML policy and procedure preparation assistance, AML CFT periodic survey assistance. Most specifically, nowadays, the authority has been sending emails to DNFBPs that was registered on the GoAML portal. So we, as someone who have a knowledge on this specific compliance, can assist your company in accomplishing the periodic survey assistance that you are supposed to comply with. After that is the conducting of AML CFT internal audit. This is going to be we will be checking how your company was able to implement this policy and procedure or the due diligence measures efficiently on your organization as well. And the last one is the AML compliance delegation, as to what you can delegate some of the responsibilities that you have, that say like for example necessary reportings that you would have to submit to the respective authority as. So to wrap up this session, these are the things to look out for right now, which is first the AML CFT periodic survey that I have mentioned a while back. A lot of our clients have been receiving an email from the relevant authority, respective authority as well, with regards to necessary surveys that they would have to comply or to complete with, as well as the risk assessment, data collection process, by which they have also given a deadline that you are supposed to complete these kinds of survey. So the next one is the inspection. So for you to be prepared on the inspection, you would have to do all the necessary obligations as what we have discussed a while back, like the policy and procedure, taking the due diligence measures as well. You would have to prepare the proper documentation to be able to pass the inspection that the relevant authority is gonna do on your business. So that's it to end of the first session of this webinar. So if you have any other queries, further clarification that you would require from our side, you can send it across on the message box so our team can have it addressed.